Order of operations. Order of operations is something you may remember from a distant math class. Well, it's back. The order in which numbers are calculated in a formula, called the order of operations, is still important. When you build formulas in Excel, you need to keep the order of operations in mind so that you set them up in the correct way and get the correct results. If you have trouble remembering the order, just remember "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally," which stands for the order of precedence among the operations. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. With that fresh in your mind, open up your Prep 1 start file to the Order of Operations tab, and we'll practice. Before we begin the actual calculations, this data is kind of spread all over the place and it's hard to see, so let's start the formatting first. And I'm going to select my entire table. And you can just click and drag to select the entire table, but the whole thing kind of flies off the screen. So a really handy shortcut for selecting an entire table is to press Control-Shift down arrow, or if you're a Mac user, Command-Shift down arrow, and that selects the entire column within the table. If you press and hold Control-Shift and the right arrow with the current selection, it will go ahead and select the rest of the entire table. So again, that's Control-Shift down arrow and then right, or Command-Shift down arrow and then right. And it will select your whole table all at once, which makes things a lot easier to format. I'm going to make sure everything is center aligned. And then I'm going to use that same keyboard command, Control or Command-Shift and the right arrow, to select the entire row of headers. These are minor headers, so I'm going to choose the light green fill with white font and bold. And the last thing, I probably should have done this while I had the whole thing selected, but I'm going to select everything again and put the borders all around. Okay, now that we have all of that, we can actually get started with the calculations. Alright, let's start with the first one. In this column, we are trying to find the function of a, b, c, d, and e, which is simply this first equation up top. B times a plus c divided by e minus d. And our goal is to take this formula and turn it into something that Excel can understand. So I'm going to click in the cell and type equals, and the first thing we're going to do is b times a. So we can do that, b times a. All right, so far so good. Plus c divided by e minus d. Okay, that's pretty good. Except we need to remember that the "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally," all of the division and the multiplication is going to be done before the addition and subtraction, when that isn't necessarily the order we want it done. So in order to make Excel understand the order that we want, we're going to need to introduce parentheses. And the first thing we need to do is the b times a. So we could put parentheses around this if we wanted, because we know that needs to be done in here. Addition isn't what comes next. In fact, what we need to do is take the c divided by e minus d, or this c26 divided by e minus d. But in order to make this work, we need to add another set of parentheses, because we have to subtract that first and then divide. So I'm going to put a parenthesis in front of this c26 and at the end of the whole thing. So this division and this multiplication each happen before they're added together. And when we press enter, we should get 8. Now I'm going to click and drag that down. And I get a lot of big numbers, that's okay. But what we really want to do is make sure that it's done properly. So I'm going to double click on the formula down here and make sure that it's referenced from the correct row and column. Everything looks okay. So I'll just go up here and make sure everything has 0 decimal places. And we can move on to the next function. The second function is going to be a function of a, b, and e. And you can see the equation over here, a plus b squared plus a times e raised to the 1/2 power. We can do that with exponents. So to begin, I'm going to type equals, and we have our a plus b, and this one is shown in parentheses, so I'll go ahead and type the parentheses now. A plus B raised to the power of 2, or squared. And then I will add to that A plus E raised to the 1/2. So A plus E raised to the, well, 1 divided by 2. I'm not sure Excel is going to know exactly what that is, so to make sure it knows it's 1/2, I'm going to put that in parentheses also. Oops, and I just realized that I accidentally typed plus instead of multiplied. Don't make my mistake. And when I look at this and we think about the please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses are going to be first, so that's good. Then exponents, so this section will be done, that section will be done, and then the last thing is addition, so we really don't need any additional parentheses. Just keep in mind that you can add extra parentheses as long as it doesn't change the order of the operations. Press enter and we get 29. Let's copy that down, and while they're selected, I'm going to decrease the decimal places so there aren't any as per the directions, and we can move on to the third one. Moving over to the third equation, we can see we are using a, b, x1, x2, and x3. So to begin, I'll type equals, and we have a times x1 times x2 times x3. So, alright, a's way over there. I could click on it, or I can simply type A26. I happen to know A is in column A, so that works pretty well. And let's multiply that by x1, multiplied by x2, multiplied by x3, and we're going to add to that b, so that's in B26, times the square root. Alright, now we're into something a little bit new. The square root function is SQRT. Oh, but I forgot to multiply that. So let's multiply that by the square root, SQRT, and you can see it pops up. And we're taking the square root of what? We're taking the square root of, so I have to open a parentheses, x1 times x2. So x1 times x2. And just to be safe, to make sure that the b is multiplied by the square root of x1, x2, I'm going to add an additional parenthesis in front of the B26 and after the very end to make sure that that is done before all of the other numbers are multiplied together and then added. So I get 12.242, well, it's asked us to round to 0 decimal places, so we will do that. I'll move this down. You can see the hint here is 27, and we got 26.6, so when we round or decrease the decimal places, it gives us 27, so we're right on. Right, the last formula uses C, D, E, x1, and x2. So let's start the formula, have that equal sign, and the first thing is C, and it's way over there, so you could scroll over or just type C26, and we're going to multiply that by x1, and that's going to be divided by x1 plus x2. Well, we know that addition doesn't come before division or some of the other things, so let's go ahead and put this in parentheses, because we know that right off the bat is going to be in parentheses. And that's x1 plus x2, so x1 plus x2. And now we're going to add that all to, so let's do another addition. And just to make sure, again, this all stays where it's supposed to, I'm going to put another parenthesis, and we have D26 times x2, to multiply by x2, and we want to raise x2 to the power of e. Close the parenthesis, hit enter, and we get 18. So let's drag this down. Hope we're close. The hint says it should be 24, and once we round our numbers, I believe we will indeed get 24, which means we did it correctly, and we are finished with this exercise. Now keep in mind that when you're trying to take a very complex formula into Excel so it can understand, the key are parentheses. If you can put the parentheses where they need to be, it's much easier for Excel to decipher the formula.